Within the deadliest concentration camp of the Third Reich, there was untold and unspeakable horrors around every single corner. Auschwitz was a site of huge slaughter, and within the barbed wire fences, over 1.1 million people died being sent into the gas chambers, or being shot in pits around the camp. When the Red Army liberated Auschwitz, they came across 7,000 prisoners who were suffering greatly, and these were the ones who had stayed behind. Thousands more were sent on death marches all around Germany and the remaining parts of Hitler's Germany. The commandant of Auschwitz, Rudolf Höss, dreamed of creating the deadliest site of slaughter that he could, and he expanded the camp to a huge extent. Höss even tested and experimented with different execution methods at the site, and he settled on gas on a mass scale. Inside of Auschwitz he introduced many different blocks and areas of the camp, which were known for their horror and evil. But inside one specific set of buildings known as Block 10, a number of doctors conducted horrific terror and experiments, and prisoners knew what was going on there, and if they were summoned to Block 10, then they knew their life would soon be coming to an end. Welcome to The Untold Past. Today we look at the unspeakable horrors of Block 10 of Auschwitz. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. When the prisoners were sent to Auschwitz, they were subjected to selection. If prisoners were allowed into the camp to work, as they were deemed fit enough to do so, then they were often disinfected and had their heads shaved, and this even included the women before their uniform was given to them, and they were then tattooed. Behind the barbed wire fences there were many different terrifying parts of Auschwitz, and the prisoners did not know what was going to await them. One prisoner within the women's camp stated of her experience that there was one latrine for 30 to 32,000 women, and we were permitted to use it at only certain hours of the day. We stood in line to get into this tiny building, knee-deep in human excrement. As we all suffered from dysentery, we could barely wait until our turn came, and soiled our ragged clothes, which never came off our bodies, thus adding to the horror of our existence by the terrible smell that surrounded us like a cloud. The latrine consisted of a deep ditch with planks thrown across it at certain intervals. We squatted on those planks like birds perched on a telegraph wire, so close together that we could not help soiling one another. Every single day there were executions carried out amongst the prisoner population, and others were selected to be sent to the gas chambers. One part of Auschwitz which became infamous for medical experiments and human trials, which usually meant a death sentence, was Block 10. Inside of here there were a number of shocking and barbaric doctors who worked and conducted different experiments upon the prisoners. Different doctors were given the license to experiment upon the inmates, and the SS granted permission to these people to do this. The camps provided an endless stream of subjects for these doctors. Inside of Auschwitz, Block 10 was known for human experimentation, and Heinrich Himmler designated that doctors could trial certain medications, and they took this very far. There were other camps where doctors subjected inmates to terrifying medical tests and becoming subjects, and inmates were forced into different chambers that pushed their body to new limits, and prisoners succumbed to their ordeals. But the experiments of Block 10 were known for their cruelty. Inside of Auschwitz within Block 10, X-rays were used as an experimental method of sterilising prisoners, specifically women, within the camp, and they did this to those who they believed were not worthy of having children. A huge Nazi sterilisation program was launched inside of the Third Reich, and within Block 10 many women were subjected to high doses of radiation through X-ray machines to prevent them from having children in the future. It was said of these experiments specifically inside of Auschwitz that experimental subjects, relatively healthy young men and women in their late teens or early 20s, who have been obtained by a previous day's order from the camp, were lined up in the waiting room and brought in one by one, often completely ignorant of what was going to be done to them. Schumann himself turned on the machine, which hummed loudly. Many of the women emerged with what Marie L. called substantial burns, which could be infected and take a long time to heal, and many quickly developed symptoms of peritonitis, including fever and severe pain and vomiting. Not long after the X-rays, the women's ovaries were removed surgically, often in 2 separate operations. There were other experiments performed upon women inside Block 10, and one victim, who was known as Miss A, outlined at the age of 83 her treatment. She stated that the experiment was done to me in Auschwitz Block 10. The experiment was done on my uterus. I was given shots in my uterus, and as a result of that I was fainting from severe pain for a year and a half, even years later. Professor Hirsch from the hospital in Severin examined me and said my uterus became a uterus of a 4-year-old child and that my ovaries had shrank. Another doctor known as Karl Klauberg was also involved in gluing together the uteruses of different prisoners. He even went further inside of Block 10, and one of his victims claimed that Dr. Klauberg ordered me to lie down on the gynecological table. Dr. Klauberg used this needle to give me an injection in my womb. I had the feeling that my stomach would burst open with the pain. I began to scream so I could be heard throughout the whole block. Different companies funded different experiments using the prisoners, and some, including Bayer, paid 150 Reichmarks for women to be used in these experiments. These were usually taken from Auschwitz and were used to test different substances, but many of the people who were taken from the camp never returned, and one letter to the Commandant Rudolf Höss stated, "The transport of 150 women arrived in good condition. However, we were unable to obtain conclusive results because they died during the experiments. We would kindly request that you send us another group of women to the same number and the same price." Eduard Wirtz was also another doctor who worked within Block 10, and he conducted experiments upon women, and he often amputated parts of the female body. And there was also Dr. Josef Mengele. He was known as the Angel of Death, and Mengele was involved in many brutal experiments, and he did experiment upon children who were taken from Block 10 to a different barrack, as well as him conducting other work inside specifically Block 10. Bruno Weber, who injected prisoners with blood from different blood groups, leading to death by blood poisoning, also worked in the building, as did August Hirt, who amassed a collection of 86 skeletons belonging to the inmates. Another inmate who suffered for many months in 1944 within Block 10 stated about her treatment that, "I suffered immense pain and cruelty from the experiments. They were inhumane, but because of them I survived. As bad as the experiments were, without them I would not be here today to write this. Now that I'm emotionally a lot stronger, I would like to describe a little more detail about my horrible experiments which, no matter how hard I'm trying to say, I will never get over as long as I live. I was born November the 23rd, 1930. I was about 5 weeks in Auschwitz alone, separated from my family, my parents, 2 sisters and 2 brothers, when Dr. Mengele pulled me out of a queue as we were on the way from the Sea Lager camp to the gas chamber. I was the only one picked out that day, personally by Mengele and his assistant. They took me into his laboratory, where I met other children. They were screaming from pain, black and blue bodies covered with blood. I collapsed from horror and terror and fainted. A bucket of cold water was thrown on me to revive me. As soon as I stood up I was whipped with a leather whip, which broke my flesh. Then I was told that the whipping was a sample of what I would receive if I did not follow instructions and orders. I was used as a guinea pig for medical experiments. I was never given any painkillers or anaesthetic. Every day I suffered excruciating pain. I was injected with drugs and chemicals. My body most of the time was connected to tubes which inserted some drugs into my body. Many days I was tied up for hours. Some days they made cuts into my body and left the wounds open for them to study. Most of the time there was nothing to eat. Every day my body was numb with pain. There was no more skin left on my body for them to put injections or tubes. One day we woke up and this place was empty. We were left with open infected wounds and no food. We were all half dead with no energy or life left in us. One day Russian soldiers tried to shake me to see if I was alone or dead. They felt a tiny beat in my heart and quickly picked me up and took me to hospital. But this woman did survive Block 10. Block 10 was a brutal and sadistic part of Auschwitz, and it was found next to Block 11, which was known for torture and execution. But despite medical experiments and work being conducted in Block 10, there was little progress made in terms of medicine, but a huge amount of suffering was dealt out by the doctors unnecessarily, and also the medical staff. This whole part of Auschwitz was associated with suffering, and next to the block was also the Auschwitz death wall, a firing range where a huge amount of execution was carried out. But from Block 10 the bodies of many victims were taken to the crematoria on a daily basis. Thanks for watching. To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe, and once again, thank you so much for watching.